It always starts before dawn, that pale gray hour when the world is neither night nor morning, and even the wind hesitates at the edge of the moor. My boots make barely a sound in the dewy grass as I lead Zephyr, my sturdy fell pony, out of the old oak shed. The Glenmoor Estate stretches ahead of us, a quilt of rough meadows, drifting mist, and the low blue line of forest. Most people see this land as a painting, beautiful, untouched, the last scrap of old England. But not me. For me, every path holds memories. Every shadow whispers with the weight of family ghosts. The silver pocket watch, Arthur's, rests in my jacket pocket, heavy as regret. Sometimes when the world is quiet like this, I find myself reaching for it, tracing the filigree with my thumb, half expecting to hear my brother's voice again. But today, there's no time for mourning. Today, the air is sharp, urgent, and something inside me is already braced for trouble. I swing into the saddle, Zephyr shifting beneath me, and we move out, picking up a steady trot along the edge of the pines. Out here, you learn to trust your senses. The flicker of movement, the sudden hush, the way even the birds seem to hold their breath. Glenmoor is a living thing, and lately, she's been uneasy. It starts as a vibration, a faint, unnatural hum riding the wind. Zephyr's ears prick forward. I slow, heart thumping, searching the horizon. Then, without warning, a burst of headlights shreds the mist. A black SUV barrels across the upper meadow, tires tearing furrows into the peat, engine howling in the silence. The sight is so out of place, so violent against the dawn, that for a split second I freeze. Then instinct kicks in. I dig my heels in, Zephyr lunges forward, and we're racing across the wet grass, the cold stinging my face. The SUV swerves, scattering a small herd of wild fell ponies, our ponies, their silhouettes flickering through the fog. I see Duchess, the big black mare, rear up and wheel away. A foal, barely a season old, stumbles behind her, nearly trampled in the panic. My chest tightens. I shout, the sound ripped away by the wind. The SUV doesn't slow. It fishtails, chasing the horses, then swerves back toward the tree line. I angle Zephyr to intercept, heart pounding, mud flying. We hit a shallow dip. Zephyr nearly loses his footing. My hands clamp tighter on the reins. For a breathless moment, I think I'm going down. Instead, we surge up the other side, just in time to catch a flash of silver. The foal, a young gray with a smoky mane, slips past the bumper and vanishes into the trees. The car brakes hard, then accelerates, headlights slashing past us before disappearing down the old logging road. Silence drops over the moor again, broken only by the distant, frantic whinnies of the scattered herd. I sit in the saddle, gasping, every nerve screaming. My hands shake as I pull out my radio. "This is Eve," I rasp, trying to steady my voice. "Possible poacher, black SUV, heading east past Red Willow Hollow. Repeat, possible poacher, herd disturbed. Send help if you're awake." There's only static in reply. Martin, our ranger, is probably still asleep, or his radio's out of range. I curse under my breath, already guiding Zephyr toward the place where I last saw the foal. The ground is torn up, hoof prints everywhere, but I catch a glimpse of ash-gray hair snagged on a branch, a small, trembling body ducking deeper into the shadows. I slide off Zephyr, moving slow, hands raised. The foal stands shivering, nostrils flaring, sides heaving. One wrong move and it could bolt into the bog or break a leg on the roots. I crouch, whispering nonsense, my own breath clouding in the cold. The rest of the herd is nowhere in sight, only the echo of panic hanging heavy in the air. Somewhere behind me, Zephyr whickers, the sound low and comforting. I inch forward. The foal flicks its ears but doesn't run. There's a scratch on its flank, fresh blood oozing. I feel a surge of anger, not at the animal, but at whoever thought tearing across this land before sunrise was their right. This isn't just a field, it's a legacy, a responsibility. I reach out, palm up, watching the foal's wide, frightened eyes. For a moment, we just breathe together. The animal and me, both startled and alone. Then, from the direction of the village road, an engine starts up again, louder this time. I flinch. The foal bolts, vanishing into the underbrush, gone before I can blink. I stand, cursing, heart hammering. Every instinct screams at me to give chase, but it's useless. The fog is closing in, muffling sound, swallowing light. Zephyr nudges my shoulder, warm and solid, grounding me. I pull the radio again. "Martin, wake up! We've got trouble, and I know, someone's targeting our herd. If you get this, head for the south gate. I'll try to regroup the ponies." No answer. Just the wind, and somewhere in the mist, the echo of hooves pounding away from danger. I climb back into the saddle, teeth gritted, forcing myself not to look back at the tire tracks scarring the land. Glenmoor's secrets run deep, and tonight they've been shaken loose. But I swear, whatever storm is coming, I won't let it break what's left of us. Ahead, the sky is turning faintly pink. Somewhere out there, my family's legacy is running for its life, and so am I. I barely slept after that night. The SUV's tracks, the scattered herd, the vision of that terrified gray foal, all of it replayed in my head as the morning sun began to fight through the fog. Glenmoor felt raw, unsettled. The kitchen was empty when I came in, boots caked with mud, eyes gritty with exhaustion. I poured strong tea, hands still shaking, staring at the estate map spread across the counter, tracing the route that black SUV had carved through our meadows. I could still smell the engine fumes over the sharp tang of wet grass. I thought maybe I'd have an hour's peace before the world shifted again. But that hope vanished at the roar of blades chopping the air. An alien sound over these fields. Too sharp, too loud. I looked out and saw, impossibly, a civilian helicopter sinking out of the sky, landing gear crushing the dew-heavy grass not 50 yards from the old manor. Zephyr, tethered nearby, tossed his head and shied away, wild-eyed. I swore under my breath and strode out as the machine's door swung open. A tall man stepped down, hair wind-blown, a heavy case slung over his shoulder. He moved with the practiced confidence of someone used to bending the world to his will. I recognized him from emails. Dr. Oliver Grant, Cambridge zoologist, notorious for getting his way and breaking a few rules if it suited the data. His eyes flicked over the landscape, missing nothing. The case, I realized with a sinking feeling, was a dart gun kit. Before I could open my mouth, he called out, voice clipped, British but with that city edge. "Lady Evelyn Hartley, Dr. Oliver Grant, you got my message, I presume. The trust sent me to help with the survey. I see your ponies are spirited." I tried to keep my anger cool. "This is private land, Dr. Grant. The herd is protected under the National Trust and English law. You're not cleared to land here, much less bring tranquilizers onto Glenmoor." He flashed a grin that didn't reach his eyes. "With respect, Lady Hartley, the situation's urgent. I observed a splintered herd on approach. Classic dispersal pattern. Could be stress or poaching. My protocol says we GPS chip at-risk animals immediately, before another incident. I'll need your help to round them up." I crossed my arms, pulse hammering. "And my protocol says you don't dart wild ponies without paperwork and oversight. These are semi-feral. One dose too strong could kill them. You want data, fine, but we do it my way. No shortcuts, no guns. Period. He shifted the case, not backing down an inch. If we wait, we lose our window. You know how fast these ponies vanish into the gorse. I'd rather risk a dart than lose track of the entire herd. Besides, the National Trust asked for results. That's what I deliver. I glared, every muscle in my body tense. I know what the trust wants. I also know what my family's owed to this land. And it isn't just numbers on a spreadsheet. If you endanger one foal, if you even think about taking a shot without my say. Grant's smile turned thin, impatient. Lady Hartley, I appreciate your passion, but emotion clouds judgment. I deal in hard science and conservation outcomes, time's wasting. The sound of the chopper still echoed between the hills, setting every nerve on edge. I fought to keep my voice steady. You want to help? Fine, but this is my home, my rules. We work with Ranger Doyle and follow procedure, or you're off my land by noon. He nodded curtly, then turned to scan the horizon, already thinking 3 steps ahead. I'll set up my drone array on the south ridge. You coordinate with your ranger. I want the herd tagged by the end of the week. He stalked off without waiting for my reply, boots crunching on the gravel, his box swinging like a challenge behind him. I watched him go, anger and something like dread tangling in my gut. Glenmoor had always been a battleground, nature against profit, tradition against progress. But now the fight was right at my door, and the enemy was someone who claimed to care about the same things I did. Zephyr nudged my arm, grounding me. I stroked his nose, the warmth of his breath soothing, and tried to breathe. The trust's directives, Grant's arrogance, the image of the foal bleeding in the mist. It was all too much, too fast. Inside, I found Martin Doyle already poring over drone footage on his battered laptop. Mugs of stale coffee lined up on the window ledge. You see that? He grunted, not looking up. Grant's bird nearly clipped the old barn. Regulations mean nothing to these Cambridge types. I sank into a chair. He wants to start darting and tagging immediately. Says the herd is at risk. He won't listen to reason. Martin snorted. That's because he doesn't live here. He just visits for headlines. He spun the screen toward me, showing grainy images of the herd fleeing through the morning fog, one pony limping at the back. Your gray foal's wounded. We need to keep a closer watch. And watch him. He jerked his head toward the window, where Grant was already assembling his equipment on the lawn. I nodded, exhaustion seeping through my bones. He's not touching the herd without me. I'll make sure of it. Martin looked at me, concern flickering in his weathered face. Eve, don't let this become a war. The trust'll always take the side with the most paperwork. Be careful. I stood, pocketed Arthur's watch, and forced a smile. Don't worry, Martin. I won't let him, or anyone else, turn Glenmoor into another casualty. Not while I still have a say. Outside, Grant's voice crackled over his radio, issuing orders, drawing invisible battle lines across my home. The first skirmish had begun, and somehow I knew the next days would test every limit I had. Loyalty, courage, and the secrets I kept locked away, closer than even Arthur's old silver watch. The old patrol hut always smelled of oak and linseed oil, the kind of scent that seeps into your memory so deeply it becomes part of your bones. I closed the heavy door behind me, shutting out the gray light of morning. My boots left damp prints on the wooden floor as I shrugged off my jacket, feeling the chill of the moor settle into my skin. The hut was simple. A battered desk, 2 battered chairs, a wall of photos and faded maps. It was the only place on Glenmoor that truly felt mine. I set the kettle to boil and pressed my forehead to the cold glass of the window. Out beyond the rise, I could still see the churned earth where the SUV had torn through the grass, the trails of hoofprints leading toward the shadows at the edge of the forest. I tried to focus on the rhythm of my breath, counting seconds. In, out. I was safe in here. I told myself that over and over, but my hands wouldn't stop shaking. Arthur used to say the land was alive, that it could remember every footstep, every kindness, and every betrayal. Sometimes, especially on mornings like this, I could almost hear his voice in the hush of the wind. I reached into my pocket and wrapped my fingers around the silver watch. It felt cold, heavier than it should have. The lid still bore his initials, faded but stubborn, refusing to vanish no matter how many years had passed. I'd replayed the night of the fire 1,000 times. The alarms, the shouting, the way the world dissolved into smoke and confusion. Arthur's room had been closest to the stairs. By the time I reached him, flames had swallowed half the landing. He'd pressed the watch into my hand, fingers blackened, eyes clear and terrified. "Go, promise me, Eve. Don't look back." I did as he said. I never saw him again. Sometimes, when the night stretched long and the wind howled through the trees, I wondered if I should have fought harder, run back, done something heroic. Instead, I was left with an heirloom and a hole in my chest that never seemed to close. The kettle whistled, piercing the silence. I poured water over a tea bag, set it on the desk, and pulled out my logbook. Every patrol, every odd sound, every animal sighting, recorded in careful, looping handwriting, just as Arthur had taught me. Today I wrote, 4:45 a.m. herd dispersed by unknown vehicle. Gray foal wounded. Poacher activity suspected. Will increase patrols. I flipped the radio on, static hissing. After a moment, my grandmother's voice came through, clipped and proper, every word a reminder of the weight I carried. "Evelyn, are you there, dear?" I pressed the button, forcing my tone even. "Yes, Gran. I'm at the patrol hut." A pause, the faint rustle of papers. "Martin told me about the incident. Are you safe?" "I'm fine, just shaken. Grant's here already. Landed a helicopter on the main lawn, if you can believe it." She sighed, the sound full of centuries. "They'll say anything, do anything, those men. Don't let them make you doubt yourself, Eve. This family's legacy is in your hands now, for better or worse." I gripped the radio tighter. "Gran, I'm not sure what's right anymore. Grant talks about science, the trust talks about tourism, and I'm just trying to keep the herd together." Her voice softened, a hint of something gentler slipping through. "You're not a little girl riding ponies for fun, not anymore. But you're not a Hartley if you give up either. Let them call you sentimental. Let them sneer. The land knows who its friends are." A lump rose in my throat. "I'll do my best. That's all anyone can ask." She hesitated, the connection crackling. "Don't forget lunch with Lady Sinclair at the club tomorrow. It matters, Eve. Appearances matter. And call if you need anything. Don't be stubborn, like your father was." I managed to smile, even though she couldn't see it. "I won't, Gran. I promise." The line went dead. I stared at the radio, the empty mug, the rain streaking the window. The rest of the world moved on. Parliament, markets, socialites planning their galas in London. But here, everything felt suspended, balanced on the edge of a knife. I took a deep breath, forcing myself to focus. The herd needed me. The gray foal needed me. Whatever Grant had planned, whatever the trust decided, I would not let Glenmoor fall on my watch. I shrugged on my jacket, tucked Arthur's watch into the inner pocket, and headed outside. The wind had shifted, blowing the morning fog into ragged curtains across the fields. I mounted Zephyr, patting his neck, and set out toward the far pasture, eyes scanning for movement. The world was quiet, too quiet, every sound magnified by tension. As I rode along the fence line, my mind churned. I thought about Grant, his confidence, his disregard for protocol, the way he seemed to think data could fix everything. I wondered what secrets he was keeping, what ghosts chased him out here to the edge of England. By the time I reached the boundary stone, a mossy slab that marked the edge of the estate, the sun had burned away most of the fog. I paused, listening. Somewhere, a curlew called, lonely and sweet. In the distance, the drone of Grant's helicopter echoed off the hills. I found the gray foal's tracks by a muddy patch near the woods. Delicate hoofprints, splashes of blood, a tuft of gray hair snagged on a bramble. My heart twisted. I crouched, pressing my palm to the earth, silently promising that I'd do everything I could to protect this land and its wild creatures, no matter what. As I stood, brushing mud from my hands, a memory flickered through my mind. Arthur laughing as we rode across the moor, his voice bright and alive. It's not about winning, Evie. It's about staying, standing your ground even when nobody else believes. I closed my eyes, let the wind wash over me, and then mounted up. The day was only just beginning, and the fight for Glenmoor, my fight, was far from over. By late afternoon, the light on Glenmoor softened to a honeyed gold, washing the pastures in a kind of fragile peace that always felt too good to last. I kept close to the edge of the woods, notebook balanced on my knee, Zephyr grazing nearby with lazy contentment, occasionally flicking an ear toward the distant hum of Grant's drone. Out here, on the boundary where moor gave way to forest, and the wind carried the faintest scent of peat and pine. It almost felt like the old days, before the fire, before the trust, before everything seemed to require a fight. The herd was scattered across the slope, silhouettes against the late sun, each one a study in wild patience. I settled my back against an ancient birch, sketchbook open, letting my hand move without thinking. It was an old habit, one Arthur had never quite understood, but always encouraged, teasing me about my secret artist phase every time he found a new pile of half-finished drawings tucked under my mattress. The ponies made good subjects, unpredictable and always just on the edge of slipping away. Duchess, the lead mare, stood on the far side of a shallow dip, her coal-black mane tangled with burrs, watching me with steady suspicion. I let my pencil find her shape, broad chest, wary eyes, the one faint scar on her shoulder that she'd earned in a winter storm years ago. Around her, the other fell ponies drifted, grazing and shifting, ever alert. The gray foal was nowhere to be seen, but I knew it was close. My sketches grew faster, lines blurring, trying to capture the way the herd moved as one organism, every tail flick and stamp part of some secret language. Somewhere above, a barn owl called, the sound eerily human in the dusk. I paused, listening. For a moment, the only movement was Zephyr, snorting as he tore at the long grass. The rest of the world seemed impossibly distant. The emails from the trust, the pressure from London, Grant's relentless demands. Here, it was just me and the horses. The silent promise I'd made to Arthur to keep Glenmoor wild, no matter what it cost. Suddenly, a branch snapped in the undergrowth behind me. My heart leapt. I closed the notebook and stood, careful not to make any sudden moves. Duchess snorted, stamping a hoof, muscles bunching beneath her skin. For a moment, I thought maybe Grant had wandered this far, ignoring every boundary I'd set. But the woods remained still. The only sign of life, the shifting shapes of the herd. I eased back down, every sense sharp, as if the whole landscape was holding its breath. I watched as Duchess slowly relaxed, her body language shifting from caution to curiosity. She took a tentative step forward, nostrils flaring, and for the first time, I saw something almost like trust flicker in her eyes. It wasn't much. Just a moment, a softening of her stance, the briefest lowering of her head. But it felt monumental. I opened my palm, letting her catch my scent, willing myself to stay still, to let her come to me on her own terms. Behind her, a few of the younger ponies drifted closer, emboldened by her lead. The gray foal appeared then, limping slightly, but moving with determination. It stayed half hidden behind its mother, ears flicking back and forth, clearly wary but not panicked. My heart ached at the sight. The red line on its flank had scabbed over, but every movement seemed careful, protective. I held my breath as it inched forward, Duchess keeping one watchful eye on me, the other on her injured child. I flipped to a fresh page and began to draw the foal, careful to get the angle of its legs right, the particular tilt of its ears, caught between fear and stubbornness. Around me, the light shifted again, sun slipping lower, painting everything in bronze and shadow. The air buzzed with insects, the sound punctuated by the distant drone of Grant's equipment somewhere over the next rise. For the next hour, I let myself become invisible, blending into the rhythm of the place. The herd grazed, Duchess occasionally tossing her mane or flicking her tail at an annoying fly. The foal ventured further, nudging at tufts of grass, always glancing back at its mother. I filled pages with sketches, muscle, motion, the particular line of a fell pony's back, the wild defiance in their eyes. A gust of wind rattled the birch branches above me, scattering a flurry of leaves. Zephyr lifted his head, ears twitching. Somewhere nearby, I caught the flicker of a red jacket. Grant, probably, making his rounds with his precious GPS trackers, searching for a shortcut to results. I tensed, but he didn't appear, and for a while longer, the illusion of peace held. It was moments like these that reminded me why I fought so hard for Glenmoor. Not for the trust, not for the Hartley legacy or the headlines in London society pages, but for this, the fragile, persistent wildness that refused to be tamed. The quiet dignity of a herd accepting you, if only for an hour, as part of their world. As dusk deepened, I packed away my sketchbook and whistled softly to Zephyr. The ponies shifted, watching, but didn't scatter. Duchess stood her ground, head high as if to say, "This is ours." I nodded, quietly grateful, and led Zephyr back toward the path. The estate lay quiet beneath the first stars. The only sounds were the distant lowing of cattle, the rustle of leaves, the echo of hoofbeats fading into the night. I felt the weight of my promise settle again, not as a burden, but as something fierce and necessary. I paused at the top of the rise, looking back one last time. The herd was barely visible now, just shapes in the darkness, but I knew they were watching. I pressed my hand to the silver watch in my pocket, grounding myself in the memory of Arthur and the certainty that, no matter how many battles lay ahead, this place, these lives, were worth every fight. The cold pressed in from all sides as darkness gathered over Glenmoor, that strange blue-black hour when everything feels possible and dangerous. By the time I reached the main barn, the house lights were a distant glow, half shielded by the old yew hedge. I should have felt safe, but the air was charged, uneasy, every sound amplified by the tension of what I'd seen and what I feared might still happen. I hung Zephyr's bridle, patted his damp neck, and whispered a promise to return by sunrise. He nudged my shoulder, as if he understood, as if he could sense the storm tightening around us. Inside, the barn was silent except for the creak of settling beams and the restless shifting of a pair of younger ponies in their stalls, shadows flickering across the walls. I checked the time, just past midnight, then pulled out my phone to scroll through Martin's latest drone images, my eyes searching for any sign of the gray foal or the rest of the herd. I found nothing but blurry shapes, wind-blown grass, and a scattering of heat signatures that might have been deer or foxes. Frustration knotted in my chest. For a moment, I considered calling it a night, crawling under the old plaid blanket in the tack room, and waiting for dawn to break whatever spell had fallen over the estate. That's when I heard the unmistakable crunch of tires on gravel outside. Too slow, too deliberate. My breath caught. I eased open the barn door, heart pounding, and saw a faint glow bobbing through the trees along the service road. Not headlights, flashlights. More than one. A chill raced up my spine. I ducked into the shadows, watching as two figures emerged from behind the hedgerow, moving toward the south field, one tall, one broader in the shoulders, both moving with the confidence of men who thought they belonged. Then, a third shape trailed after them, clutching a metal case. Grant. Of course. I wanted to scream, to charge across the yard and demand what the hell he thought he was doing. But I made myself stay hidden, moving as quietly as I could, my boots barely brushing the grass as I circled around the side of the barn. The men crossed into the field, their flashlights sweeping the ground, pausing every few yards to scan with a night vision scope. They were hunting something, and I was sure I knew what. The next minutes blurred into a dance of nerves and adrenaline. I trailed them at a distance, ducking behind a fallen log as Grant opened his case and assembled the dart gun under the harsh beam of a flashlight. He loaded a cartridge with a snap, checked the pressure, and spoke in a low voice I couldn't quite catch. Something about max dosage and don't miss this chance. The words hit me like ice water. My fists clenched. He was going to tranquilize the foal, alone, without approval, in the middle of the night. He'd crossed every line I'd drawn, every rule set to protect the animals and the estate itself. The wind shifted, carrying the sharp, chemical scent of the dart gun's propellant. I ducked lower, holding my breath, praying the ponies would stay away. But fate, or foolish luck, brought a small group out of the shadows near the far fence. The Duchess, regal and watchful, leading 3 mares and limping behind them, the gray foal. Even in the weak moonlight, I saw its uncertain step, the way it clung to its mother's side. Grant raised the gun, steadied his aim. My body moved before I could think, legs pumping as I broke from cover, sprinting across the field. "Stop!" The word ripped through the night, jagged with fury. The men spun, flashlights catching me full in the face, blinding me for a moment. "Eve!" Grant's voice, sharp and annoyed, already lining up his shot again. "Get back! I've got it! This is the only chance! Don't you dare!" I lunged for him, knocking his arm just as he pulled the trigger. The dart went wide, hissing into the grass. Duchess screamed, a high, wild sound, her herd scattering in a panic. Hooves thundered, dirt flying as the ponies surged toward the ridgeline. The foal stumbled, tried to keep up, but collapsed in a heap near the fence, legs trembling, Grant cursed, grabbing for a second dart. I shoved him hard, fury boiling over. "Are you insane? You'll kill it. It's a foal, not a lab rat." He yanked his arm away, face contorted in the harsh light. "If we don't tag it now, we lose track. Do you want to be responsible for another dead animal when the trust asks questions?" "Don't put that on me. If you hurt a single one." The other men, his assistants or maybe hired hands, closed in, tension spiking. For a moment I thought Grant might actually try to push past me, but then Martin's voice crackled through the night, his quad bike's headlights swinging onto the scene, the roar of his engine a beacon of authority. "What's going on here?" Martin's voice carried steely and calm. Grant stepped back, dart gun at his side, posture defensive. "We had an opportunity. I wasn't going to miss it." Martin dismounted, his face thunderous. "You're off the reserve if you so much as point that gun at another animal. Understood?" Grant muttered something under his breath but lowered the weapon. His men faded into the shadows, tension draining from the air. I hurried to the foal, who lay trembling in the grass, its sides heaving with terror and exhaustion. Blood matted its flank where the scab had torn open. I fell to my knees, tears stinging my eyes. "It's okay, sweetheart. I'm here. I'm here." Martin knelt beside me, flashlight steady. "We'll help it. You did the right thing, Eve." Behind us, Grant stalked away, rage simmering beneath his forced calm. I watched him go, the weight of the moment pressing down until my shoulders ached. The herd was scattered, the foal wounded, and the fragile trust between science and stewardship shattered all over again. The only thing left was the quiet promise, mine alone, to protect Glenmoor from anyone who saw its wildness as just another line on a spreadsheet. As I cradled the trembling foal, heart pounding, I knew the next hours would decide more than just the fate of a single animal. They would define who I was, guardian, survivor, Hartley, and what this place meant, even as darkness gathered and the world outside threatened to swallow us whole. I didn't remember getting the foal back to the barn, just flashes, half-memories blurred by adrenaline and cold. Martin and I carried it between us, limbs awkward and trembling, the little body shivering violently with shock. My jacket was off in an instant, draped over the foal's shoulders, and Martin fetched an old wool blanket from the tack room, hands working fast and sure, even as his mouth pressed into a grim line. The rain had started up again, thin and icy, rattling on the barn roof like the ticking of a desperate clock. The barn's harsh electric light flickered as I knelt by the foal, my hands moving without thought, wiping away blood with clean rags, checking the wound on its flank, feeling for fractures. I kept talking, a stream of gentle words I barely heard myself. "It's okay. You're safe now. I'm right here." The foal's chest rose and fell in shallow bursts, its eyes rolling back each time thunder boomed across the fields. Martin set down a tin of antiseptic and a battered first aid kit. "Hold her steady, Eve," he said quietly. "This will sting." I nodded, bracing the foal's head against my knee. The smell of blood and iodine mixed in the cold air, making my eyes water. Or maybe it was just the tears I wouldn't let fall. The old stories always made rescue seem simple. Just courage and quick thinking, a happy ending wrapped in a ribbon. But this was different. This was the grueling, ugly side of caretaking. Dirt under your nails, shivering in wet clothes, a living creature's fate trembling between your fingers. I pressed a gauze pad to the wound and wrapped it tight, feeling the foal's heartbeat flutter, frantic and uneven beneath my palm. Martin looked over my shoulder, voice low. "It's lost a lot of blood, but the wound's not deep. What worries me more is the shock. Foals this young, they don't always fight to stay. His words sat heavy in the air. I forced myself to focus, breathing deep, channeling Arthur's old steadiness. I'll stay with her. Get some more towels, will you? And see if there's a bottle left from that last orphaned lamb. Martin nodded and hurried off, boots thumping on the boards. Alone, I bent low, whispering, my hand stroking the foal's trembling neck. You're tougher than you look, aren't you? You made it this far. Don't quit on me now. The wind rattled the window panes. For a moment, the only sounds were the foal's labored breathing and the distant storm outside. I pressed my forehead to its neck, closing my eyes, letting my thoughts tumble back. Arthur running into the flames, the old house collapsing, the pocket watch cold in my hand. I remembered how helpless I'd felt, then and now, as if some great wheel kept grinding forward, indifferent to promises or prayers. Martin returned, arms full of towels, a plastic bottle of milk in one hand. She might not take it, but we've got to try. He knelt beside me, his gruff kindness a comfort. Together we coaxed the nipple to the foal's mouth, dribbling a little milk onto her tongue. She shuddered, fought weakly, then sucked a few swallows before turning her head away, exhausted. That's something, Martin murmured, settling the blanket higher on her back. We just have to keep her warm. Let her rest. He hesitated, then added, I'll stay for a bit. You need a break. I shook my head, refusing to leave. I'm not going anywhere. My fingers stroked the soft patch between the foal's ears. Grant's not setting foot in this barn. Not tonight. Not ever, if I can help it. Martin gave me a sideways look, tired but approving. You've got fire, Eve. That counts for more than all their credentials and Grant money. But it can burn you too. Don't forget to take care of yourself. I managed a thin smile. I'll rest when she does. The barn creaked around us, shadows shifting as the storm rolled in heavier. Somewhere in the distance, a flash of lightning lit the fields, followed by thunder that seemed to shake the foundations. The foal jumped, legs twitching, then settled again under the blankets. We passed the hours in that little circle of light, Martin checking the wound, me talking in a low voice, time marked by the steady ticking of Arthur's watch in my pocket. At some point, I looked up to see Zephyr peering over the stall gate, eyes bright with concern. I reached out, letting his breath warm my cold fingers, feeling the old bond between us hold steady. Eventually, Martin straightened, stretching his stiff back. I'll do another sweep. Make sure Grant isn't up to anything else. Shout if you need me. I nodded, barely able to muster the words. My whole world narrowed to the fragile life shivering beneath my hand. Alone, I listened to the rain and the hush of the sleeping barn. I could feel my exhaustion pooling behind my eyes, threatening to pull me under. But I kept watch, counting every breath the foal took, refusing to surrender to the fear that pressed at the edges of my mind. At last, just as the sky began to pale toward morning, the foal stirred, uncertain, but stronger. She lifted her head, blinking in the gray light, and tried to stand. I held my breath, heart hammering. Her legs trembled, threatening to buckle, but she found her feet and stood swaying, blanketed in wool and the faintest glimmer of hope. Tears pricked my eyes. I steadied her, let her lean against me, felt the surge of relief so sharp it hurt. That's it. You're okay now. I watched as she limped a few steps, then turned, eyes meeting mine, something wild and grateful and stubborn in her gaze. The moment held, fragile and perfect, until a gust of wind rattled the barn door and she startled, bolting toward the open yard. I raced after her, but she was gone, vanished into the mist, leaving me alone in the dawn with nothing but a handful of wool, a smear of blood on my hands, and the hollow echo of loss and relief tangled together. I stood in the yard, shivering, feeling the first warmth of sun on my face. The foal was alive. That had to be enough, for now. The weather changed overnight, the way it sometimes does in the north, all gentleness swept away by a brutal wind. By mid-morning, heavy clouds rolled down from the Arctic, turning the moor into a patchwork of trembling shadows. I could feel the pressure building in my ears, a headache throbbing behind my eyes as I paced the muddy yard, boots caked with yesterday's storm. My phone was buzzing with missed calls from the National Trust, unread messages from Lady Sinclair, and a terse email from Grant. "You left the barn unlocked. Your foal is gone. This is exactly what I warned about." I nearly threw the phone into the trough. Martin's radio crackled. "River's rising, Eve. Duchess and half the herd are down near the ravine. Someone needs to get eyes on them now." I was already moving, yanking on my raincoat, barely remembering to grab Arthur's pocket watch from its resting place on the barn window. The metal felt like ice in my palm, grounding me, reminding me that there was no one else to do this job. The wind slammed the door as I left, sending a spray of cold rain into my face. Zephyr was waiting, stamping restlessly, his mane already plastered to his neck by the drizzle. I swung onto his back, grateful for the steadiness of his body beneath me. The trail down to the river was slick and treacherous, water pooling in every dip, the sky dark as slate. Somewhere ahead, a crow called, sharp and urgent, a warning note that set my teeth on edge. As we neared the river, the sound of water grew, a roar, wild and angry, so loud I could barely hear myself think. The Coquet had overflowed its banks, turning the lowlands into a churn of brown, debris-littered current. I saw movement up ahead, flashes of white and black against the storm-dulled grass. The herd was clustered on a narrow spit of land, Duchess in the lead, her sides heaving, her eyes rolling white as she fought to keep the others calm. 2 yearlings pressed close to her flanks, wide-eyed and shivering. But there was no sign of the gray foal. My heart hammered as I scanned the riverbank. A tangle of branches lay against the far edge, half submerged, battered by the surge. As I drew closer, I saw the flash of a small body, legs churning in panic. The foal was caught in the shallows, tangled by a fallen tree, water rushing past her chest. She called out, high and thin, a sound that cut straight through the storm. Duchess stamped and whinnied, torn between her injured foal and the safety of the herd. I slid off Zephyr and scrambled down the bank, boots slipping, mud sucking at my feet. My hands went numb as I fumbled for the safety rope clipped to my belt. Martin's idea, a habit for emergencies. I tied one end to a thick root, the other around my waist, breath coming fast and shallow. The river was rising, the ground already giving way beneath my feet. "Hang on!" I yelled, voice swallowed by the wind. The foal struggled, eyes wild, mouth open in a silent cry. I waded in, water up to my knees, the cold stealing my breath. The current slammed into me, nearly knocking me over. I gritted my teeth, inching forward, fingers outstretched. The branch pinning the foal was heavy, twisted with sodden leaves. I threw my weight against it, pushing with everything I had, feeling the strain in my shoulders, the rope biting into my waist. Suddenly, another shout cut through the storm. I turned to see Grant stumbling down the slope, jacket streaming water, eyes wide with something close to fear. He hesitated at the edge, then kicked off his boots and waded in beside me. "Give me the rope," he shouted. His voice was hoarse, edged with panic. I tossed him the slack and focused on the foal. She kicked again, frantic, her flank slick with mud and rain. My muscles screamed as I hauled on the branch, Grant pulling from behind, the river surging higher around our legs. "We have to move now," Grant barked, his mask of confidence stripped away, raw desperation in his eyes. For a second, I saw not the scientist or the bureaucrat, but just a man afraid for the animal, maybe for me, maybe for himself. I wedged my shoulder beneath the branch, counted to 3, and heaved with everything left in me. The wood shifted, the foal lurched forward, half collapsing against my side. I scooped her up, cradling her neck, legs thrashing weakly. Grant pulled on the rope, hauling both of us toward the bank. As soon as we reached solid ground, the foal tried to stand, then collapsed again, shivering. I wrapped my arms around her, sobbing with relief, barely noticing the pain in my knees or the way my hands shook. Grant fell to his knees beside us, rain streaming down his face, no trace of arrogance left. "Is she?" he started, but the words died in his throat. "She's alive," I gasped. "For now." A sudden crash made us both look up. Duchess was trapped, her hind leg wedged between 2 trunks swept in by the flood. She struggled, panic rising, her cries echoing over the water. Without thinking, I grabbed the rope, lashed it to a branch, and crawled back into the flood. Grant followed, eyes wild. Together, we fought the current, mud sucking at our legs, branches tearing at our coats. I reached Duchess, murmured soft words, stroked her muzzle as Grant worked at the trapped leg, hands red and raw. Finally, with one last heave, we freed her. She bolted up the bank, shaking with terror, but uninjured. As I stumbled back, I felt the familiar weight of Arthur's watch slip from my pocket. My heart clenched. I scrambled in the mud, searching, but the water claimed it, swallowed in the rushing dark. I wanted to scream, to rage at the river, at fate, at my own carelessness. Instead, I collapsed beside the foal, clutching her tight as the first blue light of emergency vehicles flickered over the ridge. Grant slumped beside me, soaked and silent, his hand trembling as he reached out, then stopped short. For the first time, I saw the fear in his eyes, the cost of crossing boundaries, the way nature humbles even the most arrogant. We sat there, drenched and shivering, the storm raging around us, and for a moment, everything else, duty, science, legacy, fell away. All that mattered was that we'd saved a life and lost something precious in the process. I watched the river carry the silver glint of Arthur's watch out of sight, feeling the ache of loss settle deep and cold. Yet as the foal pressed close, breathing slow and steady against my chest, I realized I'd been given something else, a reminder of why I fought and what it meant to risk everything for the wild heart of Glenmoor. The sun rose slow and uncertain over Glenmoor, gilding the soaked meadows and battered fences with a light that felt more like forgiveness than warmth. The storm had broken in the night, and the land was hushed, washed clean, leaves still dripping, the moor heavy with the scent of rain and peat. I hadn't slept. My hands were raw and aching from the rescue, my clothes still damp, but exhaustion sat quietly inside me, replaced by something softer, relief, and a kind of grief that didn't burn so much as linger, gentle as the mist curling over the fields. Martin found me at dawn, sitting with my back against the old dry stone wall near the paddock. The gray foal pressed close against my side. She'd survived. She moved slow, stiff-legged, but she was alive. Her breath warm on my arm, her ears flicking at the morning gnats. Duchess grazed a few yards away, throwing the occasional protective glance our way. "You did it, Eve," Martin said, lowering himself with a grunt beside us. "Against the odds. Against Grant, even." There was pride in his voice, but something else, too. A gentleness I rarely heard from him, as if the night had stripped us all of our armor. He placed a thermos of tea in my lap, and for a while we sat together, not needing to talk. The world felt new, raw-edged, and full of possibility. After a while, Martin patted my shoulder and left me to my thoughts. I turned the silver watch over and over in my mind, feeling its weight even though it was gone, lost to the river with the last of the night's darkness. It stung, a fresh wound over the old ones, a reminder that not everything can be saved, no matter how hard you try. By midday, a pale snow had started falling, tiny flakes drifting over the broken paths and new puddles. I wandered down to the stone circle at the heart of the southern pasture, a place I'd always come to think, to sketch, to remember. The stones stood ancient and unmoved, black lichen blooming on their sides. The grass around them trampled and muddy from the panicked herd. The foal followed, cautious but insistent, Duchess trailing just far enough behind to keep us in sight. I knelt in the center of the ring, pulling my battered sketchbook from my jacket. The pencil felt clumsy in my hand, but I began to draw anyway. The line of the foal's back, the awkward set of her legs, the wary hope in her eyes. The snow gathered on my shoulders, on the page, softening every line. I just finished the first sketch when I noticed something gleaming in the grass at the foot of the tallest stone. My heart leaped. I crawled forward, half afraid I was dreaming, but there it was. Arthur's pocket watch, the chain coiled neatly, the silver face gleaming through a dusting of snow. I stared at it, breath caught in my throat. How had it gotten here? The river ran half a mile away, and yet the watch was nestled in the ring of stones, exactly where I always sat to sketch. I looked up and met Duchess's eyes. For a long moment, we simply regarded each other, the cold air crackling between us. It was impossible, fairy tale impossible. But somehow the herd had found the watch, carried it here, left it for me to find. Maybe it was coincidence. Maybe just animal curiosity, the magpie urge to collect shiny things. But in that moment, it felt like a gift, a peace offering from the wild world I'd spent my whole life trying to protect. "Thank you," I whispered, my voice breaking as I clutched the watch to my chest. The weight of loss and fear and longing that had haunted me for years lifted just a little, replaced by something like gratitude. Not everything was lost. Some things, some stories, some lives, found their way back home, even after the river tried to take them. Behind me, I heard footsteps crunching through the snow. Grant stood at the edge of the circle, hands shoved deep in his coat, eyes fixed on the herd. He looked different in the morning light. Older, the sharp lines of his face softened, all that relentless energy dimmed by something like humility. "I saw you with the foal," he said quietly. "I wanted to thank you for saving her, for not letting me ruin everything." I straightened, sliding the watch into my pocket. "You helped too, when it mattered." I watched his jaw work, 100 things unsaid between us. He crouched beside Duchess, careful to keep his movements slow, open palms visible. The mare eyed him, but didn't retreat. "I used to think data was everything," he admitted, his voice rough. That if I just recorded enough, tagged enough, I could fix the world. But last night, I realized some things you can't measure, some things you can only earn. We stood in silence, watching as the foal nuzzled up to Duchess, her limp barely noticeable now, stubborn and bright as ever. The snow fell harder, muffling sound, covering the land in a fresh, clean sheet. Grant looked at me, a hesitant smile flickering. "I'm going back to Cambridge tomorrow," he said, "but I'll write up my report. I'll tell them what really happened here, and I'll make sure you get to keep running things your way. No more shortcuts." A weight I hadn't realized I'd been carrying slipped away. "Thank you, Oliver." It was the first time I'd used his first name. "That means more than you know." He hesitated, then nodded. "For what it's worth, I'm sorry. For pushing too hard. For forgetting what matters." We watched the herd for a long time, breath steaming in the morning air. Then Grant turned and walked away, boots crunching over the snow, leaving me with the ponies, the stones, and the returned watch ticking quietly in my palm. I sat in the stone circle long after he'd gone, sketching the herd as they drifted across the whitened field, drawing hope from the silence and the gentle presence of the wild. The land was healing. So was I. As the sun climbed higher, the foal broke into a clumsy run, circling Duchess, kicking up powdery snow with a kind of reckless joy that was infectious. I laughed out loud, startling a pair of crows from the stones, and in that moment, I knew. The storm had passed, but Glenmoor and I would never be quite the same again. Snow still powdered the fields as the day lengthened, and the air held a tense, quiet charge, something between anticipation and reckoning. By mid-afternoon, Martin radioed from the main gate, his voice clipped and cautious. "We've got company, Eve. Official. I think it's time." My heart stuttered. I stood at the window of the estate office, watching the white Land Rover with the natural England insignia bumping along the drive, a beacon of bureaucracy against the wild winter landscape. I knew this was coming. Knew that the tangled mess of the last week, drones, tranquilizers, storms, near disasters, couldn't stay hidden forever. Still, as I slipped on my boots and shrugged into my coat, I felt exposed, as if the snow itself was stripping Glenmoor bare for inspection. Martin met me by the porch, his hat pulled low, eyes shadowed but steady. "You ready?" he asked, as if we were heading into battle. I nodded, words caught in my throat. The Land Rover door opened, and out stepped a woman in her early 40s, posture brisk, expression grave. She wore the familiar forest green jacket of natural England, badge clipped to her collar, hair scraped back in a severe bun. "Lady Evelyn Hartley?" she asked, voice clear and no nonsense. "Yes, and you're—" "Sarah Blake," she replied, extending a gloved hand. Her grip was firm, her gaze unblinking. "I'm here to conduct a formal investigation into recent activities on Glenmoor. I'll need access to your drone footage, incident logs, and a statement from all parties involved." She swept her eyes over the fields, taking in the churned mud, the scattered ponies, the tired slouch of Martin's shoulders. "We've received reports of unauthorized animal sedation and possible breaches of the Wildlife and Countryside Act. I'd like to start with you." I felt Martin bristle beside me, but I kept my voice steady. "Of course. Please come in. We have nothing to hide." Inside, the office was warm from the wood stove, but my hands felt icy as I pulled up the files on Martin's battered laptop. Blake leaned in, scanning the footage. The panicked herd, the SUV's tracks, the midnight commotion in the south field. She watched in silence, eyes narrowing at the grainy shots of Grant with the dart gun, the wild, frightened shapes scattering through the fog. Martin filled in the details, voice even, laying out our timeline. My patrol, Grant's unauthorized operation, the storm, the rescue. Blake's questions were sharp but fair. Who authorized the use of sedatives on the fell ponies? Was the risk assessment filed with the Trust's local office? Were welfare guidelines followed? No, I answered. I told Dr. Grant explicitly, no sedation without oversight and only under medical supervision. He went ahead anyway. I intervened, but it got out of hand. She studied me, her expression inscrutable. You realize that both the herd and your estate's standing with the Trust are on the line. I nodded, feeling the old weight of legacy settle on my shoulders. I do, and I accept responsibility for what happens here. But I want the record to show that our priority was always the safety of the animals, no matter the pressure from outside parties. Blake's pen scratched notes. And your evidence for that? I swallowed, pulling up my patrol logs, the sketches, Martin's wildlife reports, even the frantic messages from the night of the flood. I laid out every detail, not hiding the failures, not glossing over the moments I lost my temper, or the times I made decisions that could have gone either way. The truth was all I had left. Blake listened, her eyes softening a fraction as I spoke about Arthur, about the pocket watch, about how Glenmoor wasn't just land, but a legacy, a living promise to keep wildness alive in a world that wanted to domesticate, monetize, control everything. As she finished her notes, the door opened and Grant stepped in, hat in hand, his usual brashness replaced by a sober humility. Inspector Blake, I take full responsibility for the unauthorized darting. I was reckless. I thought speed was more important than caution. I see now I was wrong. He met my eyes, a silent apology passing between us. Lady Hartley did everything she could to stop me. She risked herself and the herd. The blame is mine. Blake watched him a moment, then nodded. Thank you, Dr. Grant. That will go in the record, but it won't shield you from consequences. Martin snorted softly as Grant shifted from foot to foot, chastened. For the first time, I saw in him the vulnerability that comes when you realize you're not the smartest or strongest in the room, when the land itself humbles you, and you're forced to answer for your trespasses. Blake gathered her things. I'll be filing a report with both the Trust and Natural England. Dr. Grant, your field license is suspended until further notice. Lady Hartley, the estate will receive a formal warning. Any future incidents, will result in removal of management rights. I suggest you review your protocols and reinforce your boundaries. This is not just a sanctuary for animals. It's a responsibility. I nodded, swallowing the bitter taste of humiliation and relief. We will. She lingered at the door, her tone gentler. Don't let the burden make you bitter. Glenmoor's a rare thing, Lady Hartley. Protect it fiercely, but remember, you can't do it alone. No one can. They left, the Land Rover crunching away through the snow, leaving a hush behind. For a while, none of us spoke. Martin poured tea, Grant slumped in a battered chair, rubbing his eyes, and I stared at my trembling hands, the weight of the future pressing in. It was Martin who finally broke the silence, setting his mug down with a thud. Well, you stood your ground. You told the truth. That's more than most would do. He looked at me, a flicker of pride in his eyes. Glenmoor's still yours, Eve, for now. That means something. I pressed Arthur's watch, cool and solid in my pocket, feeling its steady tick. We'll do better, I said. For the herd. For everyone who comes after us. Grant looked up, tired but sincere. If you'll have me, I'd like to help. The right way this time. I smiled, weary but genuine. Maybe you can start by fetching Duchess some carrots. She's earned them. The laughter that followed was thin, but it was real. Outside, the herd moved across the white field, wild and free. And for the first time in days, I let myself hope that the battle for Glenmoor hadn't been in vain. That maybe, just maybe, we were finally learning what it meant to belong. Not as owners, but as guardians. April came slow and blue to Northumberland, the last ice reluctant to leave the shadows, but everywhere else spring was undeniable. Green crept back into the low meadows, wild daffodils lit up the ditches, and the forest edge sang with birds newly returned from winter's exile. Each morning I stood at the kitchen window, steaming mug in hand, watching the world thaw, the land breathing again after all it had endured. There was a hush about the place, some deep pulse beneath the surface, as if Glenmoor itself were grateful, as if the earth remembered every kindness, every error, and chose forgiveness over forgetting. The investigation faded into memory, a stack of official letters tucked in a drawer. Warnings and protocols amended, boundaries redrawn and respected. Grant kept his word, writing a report that acknowledged our failures and our efforts, careful to give credit where it was due, humble in his new understanding of wildness. The trust backed off, at least for now, and the villagers who'd once muttered about Hartley's stubbornness nodded at me in the market, a little more warmth in their eyes. The storm had passed, but its memory lingered, making every gentle day feel earned. What remained, though, was the herd. Every sunrise I slipped from the house with Zephyr at my side, boots dew-soaked as I made my way to the high ridge above the river. There, in the thin blue light, I'd find Duchess leading her ponies through the new grass, the yearlings wild and sure-footed, and always, the gray foal, now named Sterling, racing ahead, tail streaming, legs strong and certain beneath her. She had grown, the scab on her flank faded to a pale scar, and when she ran, it was with a joy so fierce it made my heart ache. On one such morning, the sky blushed with the first hint of sun. I took out my phone and began to record. The video caught Sterling leaping through a sea of bluebells, the rest of the herd close behind, the camera shaking as I laughed out loud. I spoke into the lens, voice soft, but sure. Some things don't belong to us. Not really. But caring for them, learning from them, can set us free from all kinds of fear. I sent that video to the Trust's social media team, my first real message to the world since the storm. I ended it with a plea. If you love places like Glenmoor, don't try to own them. Give them space to breathe. Support the wild where you find it, whether it's a pony, a patch of meadow, or a river. That's how we keep the wild alive, for all of us. The response surprised me. Hundreds of likes, comments from city kids who'd never seen a pony except in books, from old men who remembered wild herds as boys, from young women who said they'd always wanted to protect something too. For the first time, I felt the circle widen, the old loneliness of stewardship replaced by something communal, enduring. The wild needed witnesses, not just guardians, and maybe that was the lesson all along. I spent those April days outside whenever I could, sketchbook in hand, Arthur's watch ticking quietly in my pocket, a metronome for the new season. Sometimes Lady Judith joined me, her steps slow but determined. She watched the ponies with sharp eyes, never mentioning the investigation, only commenting on the foal's progress or the way the wind set the birches whispering. "You did right, Eve," she said once, her voice soft with a pride she rarely revealed. "Arthur would be proud. The Hartleys have always belonged to the land more than the land belongs to us." Martin repaired fences, sometimes grumbling about trust paperwork, but more often humming as he worked, the lines on his face smoothed by the simple pleasure of mending what could be mended. Grant returned once, keeping to the periphery, content to observe, jot notes, and occasionally toss a carrot to Duchess. He asked no more of the herd, but sometimes I'd catch him standing in the dawn mist, eyes distant, as if searching for something only the wild could provide. Sterling grew bolder by the day, testing her strength, bucking and kicking, challenging the yearlings to sprints up the ridge. I watched her lead the way more than once, the other ponies trusting her despite her limp, a mark of survival, not of weakness. Sometimes, when I was still and quiet enough, Sterling would approach, nuzzling my sleeve, her breath warm against my hand. In those moments, I felt the old ache of loss and the new wild hope of the future braided together, a legacy both fragile and fierce. One afternoon in late April, a group of children from the village came for a tour, led by their teacher, boots muddy, eyes wide with wonder. I knelt by the fence as Sterling approached, letting the bravest child stroke her nose. "She's not tame," I explained. "She's just learned to trust, for now. That's a gift, not a guarantee. If you love wild things, sometimes the best thing you can do is let them go." The lesson wasn't just for them. It was for me, too. I'd held Glenmoor tight for so long, afraid of losing what mattered. But the storm and the flood and everything that came after had taught me something I could never have learned in comfort. To love the wild, you have to accept its danger, its unpredictability, its freedom. That's what makes it precious. That's what sets us free. As the sun set over the estate, I stood by the pasture fence, watching the herd move in the golden light. The old house behind me, the future uncertain as ever, but my heart lighter than it had been in years. I pressed Arthur's watch in my palm and breathed in the scent of grass and horses and possibility. One day, I would pass this stewardship on, maybe to a daughter, maybe to someone else who would love the land for itself and not for what it could yield. But for now, it was enough to bear witness, enough to keep the promise, enough to let the wild remain wild, even as it changed me, set me free from all my old fears. I turned and walked back toward the house, Sterling's whinny echoing behind me, the sound bright and unbroken. Glenmoor wasn't mine to keep, but because I loved it, fiercely, stubbornly, freely, it would endure. So would I.